Hey Kurt, I'm glad that you came out today and you joined us. It's
Awesome.
great. I'm glad that you're here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about what you do?
Well, hello out there, Soul Sanctuary and guests that are listening. My name is Kurt Cornelison. I'm the wonderful husband of the most beautiful woman in the world, Janelle Cornelison, who is, an awesome partner in life. And I am a contractor by trade for installation, poly, and drywall. And I also am a high-level competitor in the sport of powerlifting.
Ooh, wow, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so there's a little background sport history. I used to play hockey a lot, and that was kind of how I was brought up. And been going to Soul Sanctuary for the time I think we've been married, so about 7 years.
Wow, and I will say this, if I can just interject, I
Sure.
will say Janelle is very beautiful. He has a very beautiful wife. So both inside and out.
Thank you so much.
I know, yeah. So today you've come on, and I mean, I've asked you to share a little bit about your story, and I guess what I'm curious about is where does your story of hope start that you can recall in your life, and maybe just share a little bit about your journey with us.
Yeah, ever since a young age, I've had a kind of a knack for being very self-critical in just performance, activities, life, expectations. And we'll go right back to my mom used to sit down with me and pray with me before I'd go to bed, and this is going back to maybe when I was 3 years old. Yeah, so we would sit down and we would discuss the day, how it always went. It was something we did, and I loved actually recapping all the things that went good. But then I remember it always took her by surprise at all the things that went bad, and sometimes I would feel like I would polarize all the good with some of the bad. If activities didn't go my way or I wasn't able to complete something. And we're getting on track with kind of what I would love to talk about with everyone, is about the performance anxiety of kind of the journey of being a high-level competitor in the sport of powerlifting and then hockey, and expectations in life. There's big shoes to fill, and I always feel the pressure to do that. So
When did you start?
I started powerlifting right out of high school, kind of when the hockey journey ended for me. I loved playing all through high school, and kind of the decision was made to either go all in or take a step back and pursue other things in life, such as a career and taking up trades. And that's kind of where that started.
So for some people like me, what exactly is powerlifting? Tell me exactly what you do.
Powerlifting as a sport is something that's been growing a lot in the realm of strength conditioning. It's something that is kind of along the lines of weightlifting, to be very specific. In powerlifting, in a meet we have all over the world and in our country, we do the squat, which is putting weight on your back and squatting with your hip below the knee. And
Okay.
we do the bench press, which is controlling the bar to your chest and pressing it upwards. And the deadlift is just grabbing the bar off the floor and bringing it up to your knees and locked and your shoulders are locked. So that is what we do. It's pretty redundant. There's not a lot of cool things about it, but in the realm of powerlifting, there's a lot of good, solid life lessons that I think has taught me a lot, going through the motions and being in training and being in different environments, especially as a national competitor. Being amongst the best in our country, it's taught me a lot about discipline.
So how has it taught you about discipline?
Well, as far as where the anxiety would come in, and we're going to kind of loop back here, but
Sure.
let's go back a few years where I start to really take my training seriously, being committed to 4 or 5 days a week in the gym and making sure that I had a coach on hand, that I had the environment that was gonna kind of give me the best success I can possibly bring to the table as far as an individual, and making sure that my diet and sleep and recovery was all on point. Getting onto the platform for my very first provincials, which was back in 2017. I had high expectations, and I think I ended up winning that provincials as an 83 kg. For you that don't know, that's 183 pounds to do the conversion. We do everything in kilos, so it's not necessarily universal, as a men's open unequipped lifter. So that just means that we don't wear assistance as far as a squat suit, which consists of really heavy canvas material,
Okay.
or a deadlift suit, which has a similar material, or things of that nature. We won't get into much of the specifics. And that brought me into the running for Western Canadian Championships. And this is where I really took a turn and pushed it really to the next level. I had really high hopes to have a podium finish in Western Canadian Championships. And it was up to the last lift, and I was pulling for a position, and what I felt like I completed the lift, and I was standing, I could just remember standing there, and I was cheering in my head, and so was everybody else in the crowd. There was probably about 200 people out there that were cheering, and I remember setting the bar down and seeing the lights come up. And for you that don't know, in order to get to an approved lift, you have 3 lights that come up, either showing red or white. And I saw 2 reds and a white, so the lift was not approved, and that would have set me for my podium 3rd place finish.
Okay.
And I remember being devastated by that whole experience, and a good friend of mine, Mark Oxer, he came around and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he reminded me that in order to be a champion, you have to lose like a champion. So that was a really good life lesson on how to take defeat, even though I felt like I've done everything right. And that goes back to showing up at the gym 9, 10 o'clock at night, going through the motions, making sure I was doing everything I possibly could, and not getting the story that I wanted in the end. But ultimately, I learned quite a bit from it.
So, Kurt, when you were young, you had mentioned that you had talked to your mom and you would talk about your day and you were excited about your day, but then there was always something else there.
Yeah.
What was that?
So it was interesting when I would talk about this big cloud over my head about what didn't go right, and it would just kind of put a really dull moment on everything that may have went well. And that went into doing simple tasks, as far as if I were to commit to cleaning a room or doing a project, nothing else could get in my way until that was done. And I think that's still a little bit with how I am now. I can get really just invested into one thing.
Yeah.
And I tend to block out all the others. And I think that's what kind of sets the polarization of anxiety, is that it can sometimes paralyze you. I've been known to kind of just be paralyzed physically, with just unable to know where to start or where to go with not only how I'm feeling and the sense of continual panic and kind of what my next step should be.
So how do you navigate your way through that?
Honestly, one of the things that I did try to do was try to make a list. That was kind of my first early stages of organizing my thoughts. My mom always told me, just write it down so you can kind of compartmentalize.
Are you talking like journaling?
Yeah, I guess that would be a kind of introduction to journaling,
Okay.
I was able to set it aside, put the box away, and kind of move on with the day. So whether that be a good experience or a bad experience, or chores that I like doing or chores I didn't like doing, it was just a way for me to kind of set those things aside to kind of continue without thinking about all of them all at once. Or else the overwhelming side of me would just take over. So
I've heard of that. I've heard where if you've got something on your mind, you're supposed to kind of put it out there, write it down, and then you're supposed to try to compartmentalize and walk away and go, I gave myself like 15 minutes to think about this, to worry about it, and now it's done. So how does anxiety affect what you're doing? Let's say in your job. Does it affect your job? Does it affect what you're doing with regards to competing?
Growing up in a very, I would say, successful family, both in faith and in life.
How do you define that? How do you define success?
I honestly think is the legacy you leave behind and the people who talk about you, and more importantly, I think how your walk was with Christ. And I think that's one of the things that I would love to further discuss, is not the identity and the works that you've done, but rather the identity of a God that loves you, a living, breathing God that works inside of you to make you walk a straight path that's just faithful to Him. And with having such big shoes in the family, the expectation was always to, get into the trades, because Dad was in the trades. He had a company, and the dream is always to have all your kids work for you. And I understand that dynamic doesn't work for everybody, but it was definitely a passion of mine to get into the family business. And I had bounced around with some jobs, but the pressure of making sure that I sorted my life out was always there to bring it around and to work for the family company and to kind of find some sort of base yeah.
Did that happen for you then? Is that where you are right now?
Yeah, that's where I am now. I subcontract for my dad's company, and I've been doing that for a long time now. So.
How is that for you?
It's good. It's physically demanding because I'm on the tools every day. Definitely has an effects on powerlifting.
Okay.
And it can definitely have an effects emotionally, even though the emotional stress throughout the day is very low. Stress is stress. I like to make sure that from a holistic standpoint, we can think about that as one thing. It can have its effects both emotionally and physically.
Okay, okay. So in regards to anxiety, does it affect you in your work? Or not?
Yeah, I would say it definitely can affect me at work, mostly because if things don't go well, they go very poorly very quickly. And I tend to have an extremely critical part of my brain that really wants to take over, that really wants to make sure that I'm not good enough, I'm not fast enough, I'm not efficient enough. There's always bigger, better, stronger, faster people or athletes out there in work or in whatever people's passions are. And that can kind of just set you up for defeat already. And I remember in work, sometimes sitting on the edge of my bed, upwards to an hour, just trying to get my brain to slow down, to take one step at a time, to get my stuff together, to get my tools together, and to go out there and perform. And unfortunately, my job is very performance oriented. That's how we put food on the table. So there's always kind of that performance anxiety component that comes into my job as well as powerlifting. So
would you say that they kind of go hand in hand?
Yeah, in a sense, you could say that they go hand in hand, though I feel like the anxiety is very different.
How?
In powerlifting, we always say gravity and weight doesn't care how you feel. It's relentless in making sure that if you're not willing to put in the work, it's not going to repay you for nothing.
Okay.
Weight is weight. That's kind of how we like to say.
That makes sense.
And whereas I think that performance anxiety can come into play because there's a lot of variables that go into really good training and a really good environment, but at the end of the day, sometimes the weight will not move. And I feel like that's the fear that most people would have stepping on stage, is that there is going to be a point where you're going to put your hands on a barbell that will not move, and the thing is, you're expected to put out 100% or else it won't move. The expectation of you being able to turn it on when you step out on the platform is huge.
Have you ever had it not move?
Yeah, I've definitely had it not move.
So what happened there?
Well, I'm pretty good at just kind of just leaving it there and giving it a tap and say, I'll get you next time.
Yeah.
But honestly, I do have a realm of confidence that I'm willing to bet there wasn't a single time I didn't approach a weight or a training session where I wasn't able to complete it. And so, but with that comes a performance anxiety of making sure that I live up to my own standards.
Which are what?
Well, it could be very extremely high, and I have a huge expectation for myself. And it does creep into athletes that I do coach. I do have a very high expectation for them as well. And I have the same expectation in work. And so when you have to get up and battle the daily life and go to the gym and perform there's a lot of little decisions that are made throughout the day to make sure that both of those are in success of each other.
So what would you say to somebody that's maybe struggling with their own anxiety tonight? Like they've got stuff, they can relate to some of your stuff like that you're sharing. What would you say to encourage them? Like, how do you deal with this? Knowing that it's a part of your life, and I mean, you're putting one foot ahead of the other every day.
Yeah. I'm going to go back maybe 3 years where I started to really notice just kind of the wow nature of anxiety and how it was affecting kind of my daily life. When we bought a house, there was projects to be done. There were nationals coming up. Work was heavy, and I just was trying to figure out a way on how to deal with the anxiety throughout the day and the kind of the restless nights and the over processing and I'm going to tell you a little story about my wife. She would always say this one little thing that's so interesting. She would always say, no one cares as much as you do. Just remember that you're the only person that cares this much.
Yeah.
And it was so subtle, but it reminded me like, that's right.
Yeah.
It can be left for another day. Or there's always, you can always have another crack at it. There's never, I would like to say in life, there's not too many absolutes, but
we're always the hardest on ourselves, I think. Eh?
yeah, I would agree. But yeah, so a couple years ago, then I also saw a counselor to see if I can organize some of my thoughts and emotions on my anxiety. And that was very good. Lots of tools and how to cope. Lots of working through different scenarios on how to cope with anxiety. And there's plenty of good reading material out there and professionals out there willing to help. And honestly, the first step is being comfortable talking with somebody. And whether that be your spouse, a friend, brother, family member, doesn't really matter. Find someone to hear you out and get it out there so that you can start the road to recovery.
Yeah, that's really good. So you would say basically don't isolate yourself? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's anxiety's best trick is to keep you battling on your own. And I think just to keep you quiet and keep you in your own head. I think because the battle's so much in the gray matter up there that we don't tend to verbalize those things. And journaling is also a very useful tool. I remember reading a father who always hung his hat on those little coat racks. And sometimes you see him in homes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't think of much of those things, or even a tree in the front yard. But I remember he talked about hanging your hat, just leaving that there for the day. So whatever stress you have from the day, that to be left there for another time, and walking into the home or wherever your safe place is, kind of able to compartmentalize those thoughts and those emotions throughout the day. Or, a tree in the front yard, brushing your hand against it, because, a tree can take a lot.
Yeah.
They don't have no feelings. And sometimes you can just find a physical way to leave something out there. I think that's also very important.
I like that. I like that a lot, because when we come home, a lot of times if we have stress at work, we bring that home. And that sometimes has a potential to actually destroy our families. So I've never heard that before. I like that.
Yeah, so those are two kind of variations that I've heard of, just leaving some things for another day.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're full. The brain is full and it needs to deload. So
yeah, that's good. Counseling too, I think that it's so beneficial. Sometimes there's, I think, shame around that from, I don't know what, times are changing, but sometimes there is still that shame. Like we have no problem going to see a physician, for our physical, sick, right? But when we have stuff going on in our minds, it's kind of like it I don't know. Sometimes we think it's different when really it's not.
No, there's people out there that are more than happy to help you through both good times and bad times.
Absolutely.
And I think with a lot of mental health issues, there's good weeks, good months, bad months.
Right.
And making sure that your decision making is for being proactive.
Right.
And anticipating different triggers and different things that may in return not pay you back in a good state of mind.
Right.
And making sure that we're being proactive with our decisions throughout the day and throughout the week. So.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, if you have any questions, or if you want to get a hold of Kurt, you can give us a call. There'll be a number at the bottom of the screen, and feel free to contact us. Contact our office. We'd love to help you along whatever journey you're going through right now. But specifically, if you're dealing with something to do with mental health, we'd love to listen to you. We'd love to go on the road with you, the journey.